Look, you don't look like you belong behind that counter. Step out now.
Sir, I'm working here. What did I do?
Hey, that's the attitude that's getting you in trouble. Don't play dumb.
I can't just leave. This is my
Move
job.
Move now or I'll have to detain you. Your choice.
Don't touch me. Call your supervisor.
I'm going to tell you one thing, Agent Miller. Take a very good look at my face. Study it. Because the next time you see me, I won't be in these handcuffs, and you won't have that badge. I'll be behind the bench, and you'll be the one begging for mercy. The sound of the handcuffs clicking into place was deafening in the humid, heavy air of a Laredo, Texas afternoon. It's 4:12 p.m. The temperature is a blistering 102 degrees. The smell of exhaust fumes and asphalt is thick enough to taste. On one side, we have 2 U.S. Border Patrol agents, their tactical vests stiff with equipment, their faces shielded by polarized sunglasses that make them look like machines rather than men. On the other side, 52-year-old Elena Vance, her hands pulled painfully behind her back, her silk blouse rumpled, and her 75-year-old mother, Martha, clutching a cane and trembling on the sidewalk. This wasn't a remote border crossing. This was the parking lot of the Laredo Medical Center. And those agents? They had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They thought they were picking on an unauthorized alien who didn't know her rights. They didn't realize they were detaining a sitting federal judge for the Western District of Texas. If you're ready to see a power trip go horribly wrong and a massive system of profiling get dismantled by the very person who knows the law better than anyone, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. If you're new here, subscribe now, because what I'm about to tell you involves a secret recording, a $22 million lawsuit, and a karma twist that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. You do not want to miss how this ends. To understand how a federal judge ended up in handcuffs in a hospital parking lot, we have to go back 2 hours. Elena Vance wasn't just any judge. She was a powerhouse. Born and raised in Houston, she'd climbed the legal ladder as a federal prosecutor before being appointed to the bench. She was known for being fair, incredibly sharp, and, this is important, she was currently presiding over a high-stakes corruption case involving a ring of law enforcement officers accused of taking bribes from cartels. That Wednesday, she was off the clock. She'd driven down to Laredo to take her mother, Martha, to a specialist appointment. Martha was a retired school teacher, a woman who had marched for civil rights in the 60s and still carried herself with a regal, untouchable dignity. They were walking to Elena's car, a late-model, deep blue Tesla Model S. As Elena helped her mother into the passenger seat, a white Border Patrol Tahoe swerved into the lane behind them, blocking her in. 2 agents stepped out. Agent Miller, a man in his late 20s with a buzz cut and a permanent scowl, and Agent Sanchez, who looked younger and clearly more nervous. "Stay right there," Miller barked, his hand resting on his holster. Elena stood by her driver's side door. She didn't panic. She'd spent 20 years in courtrooms. She knew the protocol. She kept her hands visible. "Can I help you, officer?" "We're conducting a citizenship check," Miller said, his eyes scanning the interior of the expensive car. "We've had reports of human smuggling in vehicles matching this description. I need to see your papers." "My papers?" Elena's voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. "I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm also a resident of this state. Is there a reason you're stopping us inside a private medical facility parking lot?" "I don't need a reason other than suspicion," Miller snapped. "You're within 100 miles of the border. We have the authority to ask. Now, give me your I-94 or your green card." Here's the thing. Elena knew the 100-mile rule, but she knew that while Border Patrol has broad powers, they still need reasonable suspicion to stop a vehicle and probable cause to search or detain. "I don't have a green card because I was born in Houston," Elena said. "I have my driver's license and my federal identification in my purse, which is inside the car. May I reach for it?" "No, stay back from the vehicle," Miller shouted. Sanchez whispered something to Miller, but Miller brushed him off. He was looking at Elena, a well-dressed black woman in a $90,000 car, and he'd already made up his mind. In his head, she was either a mule or an illegal who'd overstayed a visa. "Get your mother out of the car," Miller ordered. "My mother is 75 years old and just finished a 3-hour medical procedure," Elena said, her blood starting to simmer. "She is not getting out of this car in 100-degree heat." "Then you're interfering with a federal investigation," Miller said. He stepped forward, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. Martha inside the car began to cry. "Elena, just give them what they want. Please." "I'm trying, Mom," Elena said. She looked at Miller. "Agent, my ID is right there. If you let me grab it, this will be over in 10 seconds. My name is Elena Vance. I suggest you radio your supervisor before you go any further." Miller laughed. A cold, mocking sound. "I don't care if your name is Beyoncé. You look like a flight risk to me." He grabbed Elena's arm. He didn't do it gently. He spun her around and slammed her against the side of her own car. The thud of her body hitting the glass made Martha scream. This is where the footage starts to get interesting. You see, Elena's Tesla wasn't just a car. It was equipped with the latest Sentry Mode updates. 4 cameras were recording in high definition from every angle. But Elena had gone a step further. Because of the high-profile nature of her work, she'd had a custom, military-grade dash cam installed that recorded audio both inside and outside the cabin. The audio captured Miller leaning into Elena's ear as he ratcheted the cuffs down. "You people think because you get a little money and a nice car, the rules don't apply to you," Miller whispered. "But out here, I'm the judge. I'm the jury. And today, you're just another statistic." "Is that right?" Elena said, her face pressed against the hot metal of the car. Her voice was ice. "Judge and jury? Agent Miller, you have no idea how ironic that statement is." "Shut up," Miller said. He turned to Sanchez. "Get the old lady out. We're impounding the car." Sanchez hesitated. "Sir, she's really old, and she has a medical wristband on." "Did I stutter?" Miller yelled. They dragged Martha out of the car. She collapsed to her knees on the asphalt, the heat of the ground burning through her thin stockings. "Mom!" Elena struggled, but Miller tightened his grip, bruising her wrists. "If you move again, I'm adding felony assault on a federal officer to your charges," Miller threatened. They put Elena in the back of the Tahoe. No AC. The windows rolled up. She sat there for 45 minutes while they searched her car. They tore the leather seats. They threw Martha's medication on the ground. They were looking for a hidden compartment that didn't exist. What they didn't see was the small, blinking blue light near the rearview mirror. While Elena was trapped in that sweltering SUV, she wasn't crying. She was counting. She was memorizing the badge numbers. She was noting the time. She was observing the lack of reasonable suspicion. She was building a case in her head that would eventually cost the Department of Homeland Security a fortune. Do you think federal agents should face automatic termination when they violate a citizen's rights like this? Or should they have qualified immunity no matter what? Drop a yes or no in the comments right now. I want to see where you stand on this. At 5:30 p.m., they finally arrived at the processing center. Elena was paraded through the facility in handcuffs. She was disheveled, sweaty, and her mother had been taken to a separate room, denied her heart medication. The intake officer, a veteran named Sergeant Holloway, looked up from his clipboard. He looked at Miller, then at Sanchez, then at the woman in handcuffs. Holloway froze. His pen hovered over the paper. He'd been in the Laredo federal system for 20 years. He'd been in Elena Vance's courtroom 3 months ago for a naturalization ceremony where she'd sworn in 200 new citizens. "Miller," Holloway said, his voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" "Citizenship check," Miller said, sounding proud. "Refused to provide documentation. Suspicious vehicle, likely human smuggling led. We're processing her for expedited removal or detention pending a hearing." Holloway stood up. His face went pale. That ghostly grayish-white color you get when you realize you're standing on a sinking ship. "Miller, take the cuffs off. Now." "What? No, she hasn't been searched yet." "Take them off!" Holloway screamed. The entire room went silent. The hum of the industrial air conditioner seemed to drop an octave. Holloway walked around the desk. He didn't look at Miller. He looked at Elena. "Judge Vance, Your Honor, I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea." The silence that followed was heavy. You could hear Agent Miller's jaw literally hit the floor. His swagger vanished. His shoulders slumped. He looked at Sanchez, who looked like he wanted to melt into the floor tiles. "Judge," Miller stammered. She said her name was Elena Vance, but she didn't say—" Elena rubbed her wrists. They were raw, bleeding in 2 spots where the metal had bitten deep. She looked at Miller. She didn't scream. She didn't yell. She spoke with the calm, terrifying authority of a woman who holds the power of life and death in her pen. "I told you to radio your supervisor, Agent Miller. I told you my name. You chose to see a flight risk. You chose to see a statistic. You chose to slam a 52-year-old woman against a car and throw a 75-year-old woman onto hot asphalt." She stepped closer to him. Miller actually backed up until he hit the wall. "I've spent my life defending the Constitution," Elena said. "The same one you swore an oath to. You didn't just violate my rights today. You violated the law. And as I told you in that parking lot, I never forget a face." "Your Honor, we were just the 100-mile rule. We had a report." Miller was babbling now. "Sergeant Holloway," Elena turned to the intake officer. "I want my mother. I want her medication. And I want a phone. I need to call Marcus Reed." Holloway nodded frantically. "Of course, Your Honor. Right away." Marcus Reed wasn't just a lawyer. He was a shark. A civil rights attorney who specialized in suing federal agencies for millions. When he got the call from Elena Vance, a woman he'd known for a decade, he didn't even ask about the retainer. He just said, "I'm getting the plane. Don't say another word to them." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, tried to do damage control immediately. By Thursday morning, a regional director was at Elena's house with a bouquet of flowers and a formal apology. "We're prepared to offer a private settlement," the director said. "To avoid the stress of a trial. $500,000. We'll wipe the record, and Agent Miller will be suspended for 2 weeks." Elena sat in her living room, her wrists bandaged. Her mother, Martha, was resting in the other room, still shaken, her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. Elena looked at the director. She didn't even look at the check. $500,000? She asked. "Is that what my mother's dignity is worth? Is that the price for the Fourth Amendment?" "We can go to $750,000, the director said quickly. "And a written apology from the secretary." "No," Elena said. "I don't want your money. Well, I do want your money, but not for me. And I definitely don't want a quiet settlement." "What do you want, Judge Vance?" "I want discovery," Elena said, her eyes flashing. "I want to see the internal emails. I want to see the training manuals that told Miller he could target a car because of the driver's race. I want his disciplinary file. And I want a public trial." "Judge, please. A trial will be a media circus. It will hurt the agency's reputation." "The agency's reputation is already bleeding," Elena said. "You have 2 choices. You can settle for a number that makes your department's budget scream. Or we go to trial, and I release the dashcam footage to every news outlet from here to Tokyo." "Dashcam?" the director asked, his voice cracking. "Oh, did Miller not tell you?" Elena smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "My Tesla records everything. Audio and video, high definition. I have Miller on tape saying he's the judge and the jury. I have him saying you people think the rules don't apply to you. I have the sound of my mother hitting the ground." The director looked like he was going to throw up. He knew right then that qualified immunity wasn't going to save them. Not this time. The lawsuit was filed 2 months later. Vance versus United States. Marcus Reed didn't just sue for the detention. He sued for 1. Unlawful seizure. 2. Excessive force. 3. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. 4. Violation of the Equal Protection Clause. During discovery, it got even worse for the government. They found that Agent Miller had a history of aggressive citizenship checks. In the last 3 years, he'd stopped 42 people. 40 of them were people of color. Not one of them had been found to be in the country illegally. He'd been flagged by a supervisor twice, but the complaints were administratively closed without action. The government realized they were staring at a PR nightmare. They upped their offer. $1 million. Rejected. $3 million. Rejected. $5 million with a no admission of guilt clause. Rejected. Elena's response became a legendary quote in the Texas legal community. Justice isn't a bargain bin. You don't get a discount for being the government. The trial began in San Antonio. Because Elena was a judge in that district, the case had to be heard by a visiting judge from out of state to ensure no bias. The courtroom was packed. Every major news network was there. When Marcus Reed played the dashcam footage, the silence was so thick you could hear the heartbeat of the person sitting next to you. On the giant screen, the jury saw Agent Miller's face. They heard his sneering voice. They saw the moment he slammed Elena against the car. But the most devastating part? The audio of Martha crying. "I just wanted to go home," Martha's recorded voice sobbed. "Why are they doing this to us, Elena? We didn't do anything." The jury, a mix of Texans from all walks of life, looked at Agent Miller. He was sitting at the defense table, his head down, no longer the judge and jury of the hospital parking lot. Then Elena took the stand. She wore a simple black suit. She didn't need a robe to command the room. "I've spent 20 years telling people to trust the system," she told the jury. "I've told victims that the law will protect them. I've told defendants that the law is fair. But that day I realized that for many people in this country, the law isn't a shield. It's a weapon used against them because of how they look or what they drive." She looked directly at the jurors. "I am a federal judge. I have resources. I have a voice. But what about the housekeeper leaving the hospital? What about the student? What about the person who doesn't have a dash cam? If this can happen to me, it is happening to everyone. And the only way to stop it is to make the cost of hate higher than the cost of justice." The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. When they came back, the atmosphere was electric. On the count of unlawful seizure, liable. On the count of excessive force, liable. On the count of racial discrimination, liable. The damages? $2.2 million in compensatory damages for Elena and Martha, and a staggering $20 million in punitive damages. Total, $22.2 million. The courtroom erupted. Martha, sitting in the front row, put her face in her hands and wept. Elena just closed her eyes and took a deep breath. But the victory wasn't just about the money. Part of the verdict included a court-mandated overhaul of the Laredo sector's training protocols. It led to the Vance Accountability Act, a piece of internal legislation that required all Border Patrol stops outside of a fixed checkpoint to be recorded by both body cam and vehicle cam, with the footage audited by an independent civilian board. And what about Agent Miller? He didn't just lose his job. Because Elena had the dashcam footage of him lying in his initial report, claiming she'd tried to strike him, he was charged with falsifying an official document and perjury. A year after the incident, Miller stood before a judge. Not Elena, but a colleague of hers. He was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. Sanchez, the younger agent who hadn't stopped Miller? He was fired for failure to intervene. He eventually went into retail security, far away from any position of public authority. Elena Vance returned to her bench, but she was different. She became the leading voice for judicial reform in Texas. She used her portion of the settlement to start a nonprofit called the Fourth Shield, which provides legal aid to people who have been victims of law enforcement profiling but don't have the money to fight back. On the 3-year anniversary of the stop, Elena was back at the Laredo Medical Center with her mother. Martha was doing much better, her heart stronger than ever. As they walked to the car, the same blue Tesla, now with a few more miles on it, Elena noticed a young Border Patrol agent standing near a transport van. The agent saw her. He recognized her instantly. He didn't puff out his chest. He didn't reach for his holster. He stood up straight, nodded respectfully, and said, "Good afternoon, Your Honor. Ma'am." Elena nodded back. "Good afternoon, Agent. Stay safe." As she pulled out of the parking lot, she looked at the spot where she'd been slammed against the glass. She thought about the millions of people who watch stories like this and wonder if justice is still possible. If this story moved you, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to see that no one, not even a federal agent, is above the law. Subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss tomorrow's story of a billionaire who tried to bulldoze a veteran's home and ended up losing his entire empire. Drop a comment below. What part of Elena's story hit you the hardest? Was it the dashcam reveal, or the moment the intake officer realized who she was? I read every single comment. Thanks for being here. Justice was served. I'll see you in the next one. To truly appreciate the scale of this justice-served moment, we have to look closer at the weeks leading up to the trial, because that's where the government's defense really started to crumble. Marcus Reed, Elena's attorney, knew that the government would try to use qualified immunity. For those who don't know, qualified immunity is a legal doctrine that protects government officials from being held personally liable for constitutional violations, like the right to be free from excessive police force, for money damages under federal law, so long as the officials did not violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights. In the first pre-trial hearing, the government's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Henderson, stood up and argued, "Your Honor, Agent Miller was acting in a high-tension area. While his bedside manner may have been lacking, he was exercising his federal authority under the 100-mile border rule. There is no clearly established law that says an agent cannot detain a person who refuses to immediately comply with a citizenship check in a smuggling corridor." Marcus Reed didn't even look up from his tablet. He just waited for Henderson to finish. "Mr. Henderson," the visiting judge said, "the plaintiff claims she offered her federal ID and was denied the chance to retrieve it. Is that correct?" "That is the plaintiff's claim, yes," Henderson said. "But Agent Miller's report says she was combative." "Well," Marcus Reed said, finally standing up, "let's see what the other witness says." "What other witness?" Henderson asked. "The mother? She's biased." "No," Marcus said. "The car." He pulled up a screen showing the technical logs of the Tesla. "You see, Judge, not only does the Tesla record video, but it also logs every time a door is opened, every time a weight sensor in the seat is activated, and even the proximity of the key fob. The logs show that at 4:13 p.m., Judge Vance was standing 6 feet away from her vehicle when the agents approached. It shows she never moved toward the door in a combative manner. And then there's the audio. Marcus played a clip that hadn't been released to the public yet. It was the audio from the moment Miller and Sanchez were sitting back in their Tahoe after Elena had been cuffed and put in the back. They didn't realize the Tesla's external microphones were still active because the car was still in Sentry Alert mode. Miller's voice. "Man, did you see the look on her face? She thinks she's someone. I love breaking the ones who think they're untouchable." Sanchez's voice. "I don't know, Miller. She mentioned the radio. Maybe we should check her name?" Miller's voice. "Forget that. She's a no-paper special. By the time anyone checks, she'll be in the system and we'll say she resisted. Besides, look at this car. No way she bought this on a legit salary. Probably cartel money or a boyfriend in the trade. Just keep the old lady quiet." The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the air vents. Henderson, the government lawyer, literally sat down and put his face in his hands. He knew. He knew right there that the qualified immunity defense was dead. This wasn't a mistake in a high-pressure situation. This was premeditated profiling and malice. But Elena wasn't done. During the trial, Marcus Reed called a surprise witness, Agent Sanchez. Sanchez had been offered a plea deal to testify against Miller in the criminal case, but he was also subpoenaed for the civil trial. He walked to the stand, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a month. "Agent Sanchez," Marcus asked, "when Judge Vance told you her name, did you feel like you had reasonable suspicion to continue the detention?" Sanchez looked at Miller, then at Elena. He whispered, "No." "Speak up, Agent." "No," Sanchez said louder. "I told Miller we should check. He told me to shut up and enjoy the show." Those were his words. And the suspicious activity Miller cited in his report, the human smuggling profile, what was that based on? Sanchez looked down at his hands. It was the car, and the fact that she was a black woman in an expensive car near the border. Miller calls it the out-of-place profile. It's not an official thing. It's just what he does. That was the nail in the coffin, the out-of-place profile. It proved systemic bias. The most emotional moment of the trial, however, wasn't the tapes or the testimony of the agents. It was Martha Vance. When the 75-year-old grandmother took the stand, she had to be helped by 2 bailiffs. She looked frail, but her voice was steady. "Mrs. Vance," Marcus asked gently, "how did that day change your life?" Martha took a sip of water. "I grew up in a time where you didn't look a white officer in the eye. I marched so my daughter wouldn't have to feel that fear. I thought we had moved past the days of show me your papers, just because of the color of your skin. But when I was lying on that pavement, when I heard my daughter's bones hit that car, I felt like I was back in 1962. I felt like all that marching hadn't changed a thing." She looked at the jury, her eyes brimming with tears. "I don't care about the money. I'm old. I'll be gone soon. But I want to know that when my daughter goes to work, she's respected. I want to know that the law she serves also serves her. That's all I want." One of the jurors, a man who looked like a tough, weathered rancher, actually wiped a tear from his eye. When the $22 million verdict was read, it wasn't just a win for Elena. It was a message. In the aftermath, the DHS didn't just fire Miller and Sanchez. They were forced to undergo a massive civil rights audit by the Department of Justice. They found that in the Laredo sector alone, there had been over 200 unfounded detentions of U.S. citizens in the previous 2 years. Elena's case became the lead example in law school textbooks on the dangers of discretionary enforcement. But the real karma happened 2 years later. Elena was presiding over a case, a civil rights suit, coincidentally. The hallway of the courthouse was crowded. As she walked toward her chambers, she saw a man in a janitor's uniform mopping the floors. He looked up. It was Miller's former partner, Sanchez. He'd lost his law enforcement license, his pension, and his reputation. He was working 3 jobs just to keep his house. He saw Judge Vance. He stopped mopping and stood at attention. Not out of fear, but out of a sudden, deep-seated realization of what he'd thrown away. Elena stopped. She looked at him. She remembered the no he'd whispered on the stand. "Mr. Sanchez," she said. "Your Honor," he replied, his voice cracking. "I hope you've learned that the most important part of that uniform wasn't the badge," Elena said. "It was the person you were supposed to be inside of it." "I have, Your Honor. Every day." Elena nodded once and walked into her chambers. She sat at her desk, looked at the photo of her and her mother at the White House, taken when she was invited by the president to discuss the Vance Accountability Act, and she picked up her gavel. She had a full docket of cases, people waiting for justice. And today, she was going to make sure they got it. Because Elena Vance knew better than anyone, the law doesn't belong to the people with the handcuffs. It belongs to the people who have the courage to stand up and say, "No more." If you're still here, you're the real ones. This story is a reminder that even when the system fails, individuals with integrity can fix it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We have a story coming up tomorrow about a landlord who tried to evict a broke tenant, only to find out the tenant was actually the secret owner of the entire building complex. You won't believe the look on his face. See you in the next story. Stay brave, stay informed, and always keep your dashcam running. What would you do if you were in Elena's shoes? Would you have taken the $500,000 settlement and moved on? Or would you have fought for 3 years to change the law? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if you think $22 million was enough, or if the government got off easy. Let's get a discussion going below.